fluorescent lights flickered as an uneasy silence settled over the central hall of the orphanage. The sterile walls reflecting shards of broken glass like fractured stars. Elara stood rigid, her slender frame poised between the rows of fragile children who huddled close, their translucent forms shimmering faintly in the cold light. Each breath she took was measured, her sharp eyes mirroring the crystalline innocence around her, fixed on the figure approaching down the corridor. Director Voss entered with the measured stride of a man accustomed to command, his tall, austere figure cutting a stark silhouette against the gleaming surfaces. His cold eyes, behind the reflective glass panes of his office, had always unnerved Elara, but now, standing face to face, the chill in his gaze felt like a physical weight. The orphanage, once a sanctuary of delicate beauty, now felt like a battleground for souls. "Elara," Voss began, voice smooth but edged with steel. "You know why I'm here. The child, the anomaly, cannot remain. Your interference jeopardizes everything." Elara's heart pounded, not with fear but fierce determination. "Lumen is more than an experiment," she said quietly, stepping forward. "They are alive. They have a beating heart, a soul. You can't just erase that because it doesn't fit your design." A silence fell, broken only by the soft tapping of glass feet as Lumen emerged from the cluster of children. The child's faintly glowing heart pulsed beneath their translucent ribs, casting ripples of light that danced across the faces of those present. Lumen's eyes, wide and innocent, met Elara's, and in that gaze, a fragile hope blossomed. "You don't understand," Voss replied, his voice cold but tinged with something almost like sorrow. "This project was designed to eliminate weakness, to create control where chaos once reigned. The children are our future, but anomalies like Lumen threaten that future with unpredictability. Control at the cost of humanity is no future at all," Elara retorted. "I won't let you destroy what little innocence remains here." Suddenly, the doors burst open. Security lead Royce stormed in, flanked by heavily armed agents. The tension shattered like glass underfoot. Myra and Jax moved swiftly, their presence a needed counterbalance to the looming threat. Myra's warm voice tried to soothe the frightened children, while Jax, with his quick, darting eyes, coordinated a plan to protect Lumen and disrupt the intruders. Elara's mind raced. The fragility of the children meant any misstep could be catastrophic. Yet, the fierce protectiveness swelling inside her pushed her forward. "Stand down," she commanded, voice ringing with authority and desperation. "These children are not your property to seize or destroy." Voss's expression darkened, and he raised a hand, signaling Royce. The room tensed as if holding its breath. In that charged moment, Lumen stepped forward, trembling but steady, their tiny hand reaching out to touch the nearest child. The light from their beating heart flared briefly, bathing the room in a warm glow. The agents hesitated, caught off guard by the undeniable life radiating from the fragile figure. Elara seized the moment. "See them not as experiments or assets," she implored, "but as beings deserving of compassion and protection. If you destroy them, you destroy a part of yourself." Voss's eyes flickered with a complex mix of anger and something deeper, regret, perhaps. For a heartbeat, the cold facade cracked. But Royce advanced, weapon raised. In a swift move, Jax intercepted, his voice sharp as he barked orders to the children, guiding them to safety. Myra gathered the youngest, her nurturing presence a balm amid the chaos. The confrontation exploded into a desperate struggle. Glass shattered, hearts raced, and emotions broke free in torrents. Elara fought not just against physical foes, but against the crushing weight of control and dehumanization. Her compassion became a shield, her courage a weapon. As the dust settled, the orphanage lay fractured, both in structure and spirit. But amid the ruins, Lumen's glowing heart still beat steady, a fragile beacon of hope. Elara, breathless and bruised, knew the battle was far from over. Yet, in this moment of vulnerability and strength entwined, she found a resolve fiercer than ever. "This isn't the end," she whispered, gazing at the children whose light reflected in her eyes. "It's only the beginning." Outside, the shadows deepened, but within the shattered glass, a new dawn awaited, fragile, uncertain, but undeniably alive. The shattered corridors of the orphanage echoed with the brittle symphony of breaking glass, a sound that was both terrifying and strangely beautiful, like the death throes of a fragile world. Elara moved through the wreckage with a fierce tenderness, her slender hands trembling but unyielding as she shielded Lumen's delicate form, the translucent child whose faintly glowing heart pulsed with an impossible life. Each beat sent ripples of light trembling beneath the glass ribs, casting faint, ghostly reflections on Elara's pale, sharp-featured face. Director Voss emerged from the shadows, his austere figure framed by the jagged remnants of the orphanage's once pristine walls. His cold eyes, the color of storm clouds behind glass panes, locked onto Elara with a calculating intensity. "Give me the child," he demanded, voice low and unwavering, the weight of corporate power and personal obsession coiled tightly within each word. "This anomaly is the key to everything we envisioned. Don't let sentiment cloud your judgment." Elara's breath caught, but her resolve hardened like tempered crystal. "Lumen isn't your property," she said quietly, voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "You don't get to decide what life is." A tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant shouts of security forces clashing with the desperate resistance led by Myra and Jax. Myra's warm, nurturing presence was a beacon of calm amid the chaos, her soft features etched with determination as she moved quickly to tend to the other fragile children, her hands gentle but sure. Jax's sharp, darting eyes flickered with rebellion and hope, his every move a calculated act of defiance against the cold machinery of control. The confrontation escalated swiftly. Security lead Royce appeared, his imposing frame blocking the path, enforcing Director Voss's commands with ruthless efficiency. Caretaker Dane, ever the detached enforcer of rules, hesitated briefly at the scene's emotional intensity, but soon sided with the security forces, embodying the orphanage's impersonal authority. Elara stepped forward, placing herself between Lumen and the encroaching threat. The child's luminous heart beat faster, as though sensing the danger and summoning a fragile courage born of innocence and defiance. With a sudden, shattering cry, a pane of glass exploded nearby, shards scattering like deadly rain. The sound was horrifying and exquisite, a brutal punctuation to the fragile balance that had held for so long. In the chaos, Elara's protective instincts surged. She caught Lumen's trembling hand, their fingers entwined, and a warm light blossomed between them. The boundaries between artificial and living blurred, the glass child's ethereal form shimmering with an almost human vitality. Elara felt her own barriers crumble, emotions she had long suppressed flooding through her, fear, love, desperation. "You don't understand," Voss hissed, advancing with the cold certainty of a man driven by loss and obsession. "This is evolution, control, perfection." "No," Elara whispered fiercely, "it's humanity, it's life." The battle reached its crescendo as both sides clashed physically and ideologically. Glass shattered beneath frantic feet, children's fragile bodies cracked and splintered, their eerie beauty marred by damage. Yet from the brokenness emerged a new strength, a testament to resilience born from fragility. Elara's eyes shone with tears and resolve as she fought not just for survival, but for a redefinition of existence. Lumen's heart pulsed in synchrony with hers, a beacon of hope amid the ruins. The orphanage, once a cold sanctuary of control, was now a battleground where innocence and cruelty collided, where reflection was no longer just in glass, but in the soul. As the dust settled and the echoes of conflict faded, Elara stood amidst the wreckage, shattered, scarred, yet unbroken. The fragile children, some broken, some whole, gathered around her, their translucent forms catching the faint light like fragments of a shattered dream reborn. The line between artificial and living had been irrevocably blurred. In that fragile space, Elara found a fierce new purpose. The future was uncertain, shadowed by loss and fear, but also illuminated by the fragile, flickering light of hope. She tightened her grip on Lumen's hand and whispered, "We will be whole again." And somewhere beneath the broken glass and quiet ashes, a heart continued to beat, fragile, resilient, and alive. The chapter closes on Elara's fierce, tearful gaze as she shields Lumen, the orphanage fractured but not defeated. The haunting melody of broken glass lingers, a reminder that even in shatteredness, there is the possibility of wholeness. What new paths will Elara and the children forge from the ruins? The answer waits beyond the fragile dawn. The dawn crept slowly over the shattered remains of the orphanage, casting pale light on jagged shards of glass that littered the cold floor like fallen stars. Elara stood silent amidst the ruins, the weight of loss pressing heavily against her chest. Her reflective eyes, sharp and clear as the fragile children she had tended, scanned the devastation. The sterile walls she once knew so well were fractured, cracked, and broken, a mirror to the shattered innocence she sought to protect. Every breath she drew was thick with the scent of smoke and dust, a harsh reminder of the violence that had fractured their sanctuary. Yet even in this desolation, there was a glimmer, a fragile hope that refused to be extinguished. Lumen, the heart-bearing child, moved slowly through the wreckage, translucent form flickering with faint pulses of light. The child's delicate hand reached out, gathering shards of glass scattered like forgotten memories, as if attempting to piece together not only the physical fragments, but the broken spirit of their home. Elara's gaze softened as she watched Lumen's gentle movements. The child's radiant presence was a beacon in the gloom, a living testament to resilience amidst fragility. It was this paradox, the simultaneous vulnerability and strength, that anchored Elara's resolve. She knelt beside Lumen, her fingers trembling slightly as they brushed against the child's cool, glassy skin. "We will make it whole again," she whispered, voice steady despite the quiver beneath. Behind them, Myra moved quietly through the corridors, her soft features etched with exhaustion yet glowing with steadfast warmth. She wrapped a trembling child in a worn blanket, her soothing voice weaving threads of comfort through the cold, broken hallways. "You're safe now," Myra murmured, her words a balm against the lingering echoes of fear. The children, their translucent forms fractured but still luminous, huddled close, seeking solace in small acts of tenderness. Not far off, Jax worked with focused determination, his disheveled hair falling into darting eyes that scanned the damaged security panel he was hastily repairing. Each precise movement echoed the urgency of their fragile future being pieced together. The orphanage's defenses, once cold and impersonal, were now imbued with a new purpose, the protection of lives that mattered beyond mere experiments or profit. Elara rose, her slender frame silhouetted against the growing light. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with peril. The scars left by Director Voss and his forces were deep, not only in the broken walls, but in the hearts of those who survived. Yet within this crucible of loss, Elara felt a stirring of something fierce and unyielding. She was no longer the detached scientist or the cautious caretaker. She was a guardian, a fierce protector of fragile lives, a fierce advocate for hope amid despair. Her voice broke the heavy silence. "We will rebuild, not just this place, but everything it stands for." She met the eyes of Myra, Jax, and Lumen, finding in them the reflection of her own renewed purpose. The children, once mere glass creations, were now symbols of resilience and new beginnings. As the sun rose higher, casting prisms of light through the broken panes, the orphanage breathed again, fragile, yes, but alive. And in that fragile breath lay the promise of a future where innocence could be nurtured, where reflection was not only in glass, but in the soul. Elara stepped forward, each footfall a quiet vow. The ashes of the past would feed the roots of tomorrow, and no matter how delicate, no matter how easily shattered, they would endure. But even as hope blossomed, shadows lingered. The world beyond the orphanage's walls was watching, waiting. And Elara knew the true test had only just begun. She glanced down at Lumen's glowing heart, faint but steady beneath fragile ribs. "Together," she whispered, "we will face whatever comes next." The orphanage was broken, but it was not defeated, and neither was she. Outside, the first rays of dawn caught on a shard of glass, fracturing light into 1,000 colors, a fragile, beautiful promise of what could still be. The story of the glass children was far from over. it was only just beginning. The ruins of the once sterile orphanage lay scattered beneath a sky that blurred the line between dusk and night. The pale hues of twilight filtering through shattered glass and fractured steel like a fragile promise. Elara moved slowly among the remnants, her pale fingers brushing lightly against the broken edges, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of what remained. Around her, the surviving glass children huddled close, their translucent bodies flickering with faint pulses of light, reflections intertwining with shadows in a dance as old as fragility itself. At the center of the gathering stood Lumen, their glass ribs faintly aglow with the rhythmic thrum of a real, beating heart. That soft pulse was a beacon, a fragile light in the encroaching darkness. Elara's sharp, reflective eyes mirrored the child's glow, a quiet determination settling deep within her. This was no longer just an orphanage. It was a sanctuary where innocence, though broken, could still survive and grow. Myra knelt beside a small, cracked figure, her warm hands cradling the child with careful reverence. Her soft features, worn but resolute, reflected a fierce loyalty that transcended the ruins. "They're looking to you," Myra whispered to Elara, her voice steady despite the weight of the night. "They need your strength." Elara nodded, swallowing the tightness in her throat. The memories of loss and fear still lingered like ghosts, but here, among these fragile beings, she found a new purpose. She crouched closer to Lumen, her breath catching as the child's glowing heart pulsed steadily beneath the glass surface. "You're the light," she murmured, her voice trembling with awe. "The fragile light that won't go out." Jax moved deftly through the shadows of the crumbled walls, his disheveled form a stark contrast to the eerie stillness around him. His quick, darting eyes scanned the perimeter, alert for threats both seen and unseen. Spotting Elara, he paused, offering a nod that spoke volumes, a silent vow to stand alongside her in this fragile new world. The air was heavy with the scent of dust and shattered dreams, yet beneath it all, a quiet warmth blossomed. The children's surreal, otherworldly behavior softened, their luminescent forms intertwining in gentle gestures of trust and connection. The orphanage's sterile coldness was gone, replaced by something infinitely more precious. A fragile hope that flickered in the spaces between broken glass and whispered promises. Elara rose, feeling the weight of her transformation settle like a mantle over her shoulders. No longer the detached scientist or cautious caretaker, she was now the guardian of a delicate future. The shards of the past would not define them. Instead, they would be the foundation upon which new light was built. As twilight deepened, Lumen's heart pulsed brighter, casting rippling reflections that danced across the walls and the faces of those gathered. It was a testament to resilience, a fragile, shining defiance against the darkness that threatened to consume them. And in that fragile glow, Elara saw the promise of a tomorrow where innocence could be fiercely protected, where the delicate balance of vulnerability and strength was not a weakness, but a source of power. The journey ahead would not be easy, but together they would face it, glass and light entwined, unbreakable in their fragile hope. The night whispered around them, but Elara stood unwavering, her heart aligned with the steady beat beneath Lumen's glass ribs. "We will endure," she vowed softly, "because we must, because this light is worth everything." Outside, the first stars began to pierce the gathering darkness, their distant shimmer a quiet chorus to the fragile symphony unfolding within the shattered walls. And as the orphanage settled into uneasy silence, the glow of a single, beating heart illuminated a path forward, fragile, luminous, and fiercely alive. The morning light filtered softly through the fractured window panes of the orphanage's main hall, casting fractured patterns of shadow and brilliance across the cold floor. Elara stood silently before the broken glass, her sharp, reflective eyes tracing the shimmering shards that caught the dawn's hesitant glow. Each splintered fragment seemed to tell a story, a mosaic of past failures, shattered hopes, and fragile dreams waiting to be reassembled. The air was still, charged with the quiet pulse of new beginnings tempered by the weight of what had been lost. In this fragile light, Elara felt the deep stirrings of a renewed resolve. The long nights of fear and desperation, the heavy burden of protecting the glass children from forces that sought to exploit or destroy them, had carved deep lines in her soul. Yet now, amidst the ruins of the orphanage, there was a whisper of something stronger, a fragile hope that could not be broken so easily. It was a hope born not just from survival, but from an understanding that fragility and strength were not opposites, but intertwined threads in the same delicate fabric. Behind her, the soft murmur of voices drew her attention. Myra sat in a quiet corner, her gentle hands cradling a small glass child whose translucent fingers curled faintly around her own. The child's fragile form shimmered with pulses of light, each flicker a testament to the delicate life within. Myra's presence was a balm, her warmth and nurturing spirit a stark contrast to the cold sterility that had once defined the orphanage. Nearby, Jax leaned over a hollow display, his disheveled hair falling into sharp, darting eyes as he traced the blueprints of the damaged facility. His rebellious spirit had found new purpose here, a chance to right the wrongs he had once been complicit in. Elara approached the pair, the soft sound of her footsteps a quiet rhythm in the hushed room. "We have a long road ahead," she said, her voice steady yet carrying the weight of unspoken fears and fierce determination. "But we will build something better, something that honors their fragility and their strength." Myra looked up, her soft features illuminated by the glow of the holographic table. The children need more than shelter. They need safety, understanding, and a place where their uniqueness is respected. Jax nodded, tapping a sequence on the interface. "I've been working on new security protocols, less intrusive but effective. We can shield them without making this a prison." Lumen appeared then, stepping into the pool of light near the window. The child's translucent glass body shimmered faintly, the faint glow of a real beating heart visible beneath the ribs, a beacon of life and hope amid the fragile forms around. Lumen reached out a delicate hand, sending ripples of reflected light dancing across the walls. The reflections flickered like living memories, fragile yet persistent, much like the child herself. Elara's gaze softened. "You've become our heart," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "a symbol of everything we're fighting to protect." The group fell into a solemn silence, bound by shared purpose and the heavy knowledge of what was at stake. The orphanage's shattered state was a physical scar, but it also symbolized the emotional fractures they had endured. Yet within those cracks, light found a way to seep through. Hours passed as they mapped out plans, renewed architectural designs emphasizing openness and safety, ethical frameworks that would govern the care of the children, and protocols to prevent exploitation. Each decision was a careful balance, a negotiation between vulnerability and resilience. Elara reflected on her own transformation. Once a detached scientist, then a reluctant caretaker, she now embraced her role as protector with fierce courage and renewed empathy. The reflections in the glass children's eyes mirrored her own journey, fragile yet unyielding, fractured but whole. As twilight deepened outside, Elara returned to the shattered window. She reached out, fingertips brushing a jagged edge. The glass was cold, sharp, and unyielding, yet in its fractured beauty, she saw the possibility of renewal. The reflection staring back was not the same as before. It was tempered by sorrow, illuminated by hope, and strengthened by the knowledge that even in the most delicate forms, resilience could be born. "We will rise," she whispered into the quiet. "Fragile, yes, but unbroken." The chapter closed not with certainty, but with a promise, a fragile tomorrow where reflections were not just echoes of the past, but the light that guided the way forward. The first light of dawn filtered through the fractured glass panes of the orphanage's main hall, scattering shards of pale illumination across the cold floor. Elara stood silently by the great window, her sharp eyes reflecting the fractured light in patterns that seemed to dance like ghostly echoes of the past. Around her, the surviving glass children gathered in clusters, their translucent bodies catching and refracting the dawn's glow, fragile and beautiful as ever. Lumen, the heart-bearing child, stood slightly apart, the faint pulse of life beneath their ribs casting a gentle radiance that contrasted with the coldness of the shattered walls. Elara's breath came slow and steady as she surveyed the scene before her. The orphanage lay broken, its sterile perfection shattered by the chaos of the recent conflict. Yet in this ruin, a fragile hope stirred. The children, delicate as the glass they were made from, had endured. Their innocence remained unbroken, shimmering like the morning light on fractured crystal. Moving away from the window, Elara crossed the hall with measured steps, her fingers trailing lightly over the smooth surfaces of the children as she passed. Each touch was a promise, a vow to protect them from the outside world's harshness. She paused by Lumen, who was crouched by a small sprout pushing through a crack in the floor. The child's glowing heart cast a soft light on the tender green shoot, a symbol of life persisting against all odds. "Do you see it, Lumen?" Elara whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. The child's eyes, wide and luminous, met hers in quiet understanding. Lumen's tiny hand reached out, fingertips brushing the delicate leaves, their touch sending scattered prisms of light flickering across the broken floor. In that moment, Elara felt the weight of everything she had fought for, the fragile boundary between protection and freedom, between vulnerability and resilience. The children were more than glass and light. They were living reflections of hope, fragile yet unyielding. Behind her, soft footsteps approached. Myra appeared, her presence a balm to the tense quiet. She moved among the children with gentle care, her voice a soothing murmur that wove warmth through the cool air. Nearby, Jax lingered by the entrance, his restless gaze scanning the horizon, ever watchful. The trio formed a fragile circle of guardianship around the children, each bringing their strengths to bear in this uncertain new dawn. Elara allowed herself a brief moment of respite, leaning against the cold wall as her eyes traced the shards of glass in a small sculpture crafted from the orphanage's remnants. Each fragment caught the light differently, some sharp and jagged, others smooth and curved, mirroring the fractured memories she carried within. Past failures, lost hopes, and the fierce love that had grown in the shadow of those losses all converged in this fragile symbol. Tomorrow is fragile, she thought, but it is ours to shape. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the broken glass before her, a reminder of the delicate balance she must now embody, protector and nurturer, warrior and healer. The world beyond the orphanage's walls remained shadowed by threats, by those who sought to control, to exploit, to destroy. Yet within these walls, a new beginning had taken root. Elara's voice broke the stillness as she spoke to the children, her words carrying the weight of both caution and hope. "We have survived the night. Now we begin again, together." Lumen's glowing heart pulsed softly in response, a beacon in the growing light. Outside, the wind stirred the broken leaves and scattered dust, carrying with it the promise of change. The fragile children, under Elara's vigilant gaze, were no longer mere reflections of innocence. They were the first light of a fragile tomorrow, resilient and alive. And as the sun rose higher, casting long, fractured shadows across the orphanage's shattered halls, Elara stepped forward, ready to face the uncertain road ahead with a heart as fragile and as strong as the glass children she loved. The future was fragile, but it was theirs, and that was enough to hold on to. The morning unfolded with a quiet grace, the air thick with the scent of fresh earth and lingering smoke from the fires that had raged the night before. The children moved slowly, their delicate forms shimmering like living crystal, fragile but unbroken. Elara and Myra worked side by side, tending to minor cracks and ensuring the children's safety. Jax's presence was a steady reassurance, his eyes sharp and watchful as he patrolled the perimeter, wary of any lingering threats. In a small corner of the courtyard, Lumen sat cross-legged, the glow of their heart casting soft ripples of light across the cracked concrete. A gentle breeze stirred their hair as they reached out to touch a cluster of wildflowers that had taken root amidst the ruin. Their fingertips traced the petals with reverence, the moment filled with a silent promise of hope and renewal. Elara approached quietly, kneeling beside Lumen. "You remind me," she said softly, "that even the smallest light can break through the darkest night." Lumen's luminous eyes met hers, and for a heartbeat, the boundary between caretaker and child dissolved. In that shared gaze was a profound understanding, a fragile connection that transcended glass and flesh. As the day wore on, Elara found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The sterile halls, the cold experiments, the shattering betrayals, all led to this fragile moment of new beginnings. She thought of the children as reflections of herself, fragile yet unyielding, mirrors of the soul's capacity to endure. Night approached once more, but this time, Elara faced it with a steadiness born of hard-won hope. She stood watch by the window, eyes sharp and reflective, heart open and guarded. The glass children slept peacefully, their fragile forms aglow with quiet life. And outside, beyond the shattered walls, the world waited, uncertain, fragile, but alive with possibility. Elara whispered into the night, a vow carried on the wind, "I will protect you, all of you, no matter what comes." The fragile tomorrow had dawned, and with it, a promise that even in brokenness, life could shine.